Hello, interwebs. I hope you're all doing well, because I am here to review the Series 2 finale of this latest iteration of Doctor Who, this episode titled Reality War. And oh boy, is there a lot. There is a lot to talk about with this episode. I don't even know entirely where to begin with what happened. What did I just watch? What I can say right up front is that this is probably the most Russell T Davies-ass finale I have ever seen in my life. And that is saying something, considering the finales that Russell T Davies gives us. This had pretty much everything. And I'm just going to say this right up front. Like, we're going to have to go full-bore spoilers into this right away. There's just no way I can talk about this episode without discussing spoilers. So if you have not seen the episode, for the love of God, go experience whatever this was for yourself, because I think it needs to be experienced on its own terms without any preparation, because I don't really think any amount of prepping can prepare you for what is happening here. So just forewarning on that front. Sitting with this finale for a little bit after I watched it, the more and more I think about it, the more I really, really dislike it for a number of reasons. And that's not to say it's not enjoyable while watching. Like, as often happens with Russell T Davies finales, there's a certain pleasure in sort of seeing all these like weird Chekhov's guns that he has placed around throughout the season fire off, but it's always a kind of, and I think this episode really epitomizes this for me, a sort of empty calorie version of those things, because they're never really set up in a very satisfying way. So when they pay off, they don't feel like they're like a good payoff to something. They're just sort of like, oh yeah, that's the thing from before. I think the best example of this that I can give is right at the top, where Anita comes in and saves the Doctor from the Time Hotel. Which I initially, again, while watching, I'm like, oh yeah, Anita. I love Anita. She was great in the Christmas special. She was probably my favorite part of that whole episode. And seeing her come back, it feels like, oh, that's a satisfying payoff to that. But then I'm like, but that doesn't necessarily narratively, like, flow with what's going on here. She just randomly appears. And then even worse than that, she starts being able to open up doors wherever she wants, which kind of ruins the whole fun of what the Time Hotel was. Like, one of the best parts of the idea of the Time Hotel from the Christmas special was that it appears from the doors of hotels that you never open. That are always like, oh, that's a weird door here that I never think about. Usually it's a door to like the room across the next room over that you just never use because you're not renting both rooms. But it's like a cool, creepy idea that is just totally tossed away here. So it undermines the whole fun, interesting concept of what the Time Hotel was. And also the Time Hotel isn't really set up in any way in this narrative, so it's just a thing that appears. And it just has this like empty calorie sort of like, oh yeah, I remember that. That's a cool thing that was set up relatively recently that feels like a payoff, but ultimately doesn't have a lot of substance to it. And this episode, especially given what it ends up being, which again, we're going to have full spoilers here, so I'm going to say this in just a second. It feels like it's a celebration of Ncuti Gatwa's era as the Doctor, considering, last warning, this is his last episode, it presumes to be, as he regenerates into, well, we'll get there. We'll get into who he regenerates into in just a second. But this whole episode just does feel like, here's all these different things that are from these past 2 years or so of Ncuti's era, as sort of like a celebration of his era, but you don't really, it feels, again, weirdly hollow. And also, as I'm watching it, you don't, especially on first watch through, because there's been rumors that he was going to regenerate and everything, like leaks and stuff like that. But you don't really know it until you're getting to the end of this being like, oh, this is what this is. And so by doing that, it sort of is this like, oh, I guess that's what this was. And now I'm not reveling in the like, oh, this is the goodbye moment. It's like a weird, oh, here's all these Chekhov's guns of things that I didn't know I wanted. Like, there's no real satisfactory payoff to them. They're just sort of here as a celebration that I didn't know was a celebration, you know? There are a couple small things that I do like about this episode, mostly coming off of the back of last week's episode, like Rose Noble coming back, and the doctor even saying like, oh, Conrad could never even imagine you, so you were just gone, which is very clearly a nod to how trans women are being erased in the UK and elsewhere, which I like as an idea. I would like more if Rose was an actual fucking character in the show instead of just being there as a tokenistic trans inclusion. And that ultimately is what kind of gets me about her. Like, I was willing to forgive a little bit of her just sort of random appearances in last season, but her coming back here, it just really just proves to me that it's Russell not just tokenistically including the trans character, because it's sort of like, it's, well, it'd be weird to include the trans character in Donna's era and then just like never bring her back at any point. And it's kind of sad that that's all she really amounts to, that she's just sort of like a symbol here and not a full functioning character on her own. I like the idea, and Russell's heart is in the right place. And something I even forgot to mention, I did really like last episode that the Doctor Who book that Conrad has was shaped like, was formatted and looked like the cover of the original Harry Potter book cover. So just a snide sort of like commentary on J.K. Rowling and her, gender critical fascism. So I appreciate that. His heart's in the right place, but I think he could have done more on that front if he's going to really do stuff like that. So there are some small things here, but let's get into some other bigger picture stuff. Let's talk about the Ronnie first and foremost. The Ronnie was completely wasted here. I do like her plan that she wants to bring back the Time Lords, but it's a eugenics version of the Time Lords, that she's sort of like, we're the epitome. We want to bring back this sort of pure, powerful planet. I like the idea when we'll get to Poppy more in a second, but when the doctor says like, oh, Poppy's part human, part Time Lord, she could be the new generation of the Time Lords. Ronnie just sort of starts going off on her eugenics bullshit, and everyone just sort of like exasperated sighs, like I like the kind of like bored, like, oh god, we're doing this. Like, that's the perfect response to eugenics nonsense. I actually really love that. I usually, when people start spouting eugenics stuff, it's like, ooh, they're evil. I just love everyone just being like an exasperated, like, really? Like, I actually really enjoyed that. But then she just has this whole, it's again a Russell T Davies plot where it's just a bunch of like wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey, techno-babbly kind of stuff that she's using to bring back Omega. And then we get to Omega coming through, and he's just this big monster thing who immediately eats her, and then Mrs. Flood runs away. So just like Ronnie's done with completely. So it's just sort of like, what were we even doing with her that was interesting? She's just completely wasted here, which is absolutely disappointed. And then Omega's pretty much done right like that. And I don't have a big connection to Omega. The only thing that I know about Omega is actually from just like reading Wikipedia pages in the last week, and also from my friend Vera Wild, who does her own Doctor Who reviews on her channel Council of Geeks, her sort of discussing who Omega is. But from what I can tell from her discussion, Omega was an interesting villain because he was sort of this like delusional guy who was sort of like, I deserve to be remembered, but he was sort of tossed aside, even though he sort of like created this sort of like very colonial, I guess, or powerful, like the sort of like Time Lords on top sort of idea, which is an interesting concept as a villain, but he's just sort of weird monster here that's done away with in 2 seconds by the, MacGuffin of the season, the Vindicator, which again, Russell T Davies-ass thing, right? That's not necessarily new for Russell. He's done that pretty much every single finale he's ever done for Doctor Who. So, it's not unique. It's not great, but it's not unique. So I am just sort of like, all right, well, Ronnie's sort of done with, and the Omega's done with very quickly. And the other element of this is the thing that I personally hate the most about this episode. Like, I absolutely despise the fact that this all revolves around saving Poppy. And I want to kind of get a little nuanced into why I dislike it. There's a few reasons. One, just to be clear on the surface, I am totally here for like saving the child, saving the kid. Like I am down for the doctor trying to save one kid and doing all of this to save a kid. That's fine and that's great to me. But I dislike what it does to frame the doctors, especially considering it's his final adventure, because he is not, I want to say the first gay doctor. We get Jodie Whittaker, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. But Jodie Whittaker was also a gay doctor. But he is one of the few overtly gay doctors that we've gotten. In fact, gay from the start. Like Jodie Whittaker's doctor, they sort of discovered that she was interested in Yaz and had a whole thing there, and it was never really confirmed until the very end. The whole weird nonsense of how that developed. Which, I'm not knocking. Sometimes that happens with shows where you find there's chemistry here. This is that we figure out what they are. That happens in real life. It happens in stories. It's a thing. So I'm not knocking that. I knock the execution of Yaz and the Doctor from that era. I don't necessarily knock how they found it. But here, Ncuti was written as a gay doctor from the start. In fact, we even get a callback to that right at the beginning where Anita looks through the door. And again, we get this sort of, by the way, I forgot to mention that, Anita doing the whole, I was part of your life this entire time, Doctor thing from all the way back in the 11th Doctor era, sort of a reiteration of that. But she's in love with the Doctor and doesn't get to be with him because he's gay. And we get a reiteration of he's interested in men. But then the whole episode is sort of functioning around him having to save this family that was very much coded in this suburban sort of fantasy made by a conservative far-right douche nozzle, Conrad. And again, I'm not knocking the idea of saving a kid. I'm not against having children, but it's weird to me to have the final story of this Doctor who has been written to be a gay man from the start revolve around saving this heterosexual family. It's a similar critique. I'm not going to spoil this for you if you haven't watched that show, but it's a similar critique to something I was watching in Star Wars Andor, so which is why I've been thinking about it. In fact, I have the book right here. I've been writing a video essay for my main channel on Star Wars Andor and why I love it, but there's one note in the season that, again, I won't spoil for you, but there's one note in the season that kind of touches upon the similar idea of this unquestioned idea that we need to save this heterosexual family, that we need to that the end goal is to sort of create this sort of idealized family unit is sort of the end all be all of all things, even for people who never expressed that desire, or for gay people, ultimately this is the thing that we need to save. And this is a book by Lee Edelman, which is a really good book that you should read if you're interested. It's called No Future. And it talks about this idea of reproductive futurism, that our society kind of has this unquestioned view of the child as the future. And it kind of goes against, it sort of pushes against queerness. And again, it's not to say that families are bad, heterosexual families are bad or things like that, but this unquestioned idea of it being the end-all be-all, especially for it being the end-all be-all for a gay doctor, is very frustrating. And then on top of that, we also have Belinda sort of just stuck being a mom at the end of this. She's literally shoved into a box to protect a kid. To be erased from time in this whole finale. So everyone's out doing everything, and Belinda is shoved in a box being a mom protecting a child. There's this continual, again, things with stories of the mom just needs to be there protecting the child. And it's weird to do it to Belinda, who has been this character who I've really liked. What a waste of her character, who's really had her own personality of pushing against the Doctor right from the start. She's been a nurse right from the start. She had these interesting ideas, and then the last few episodes just all gone away as that we've fallen into this veneration of the Doctor. She's not even really scared of the Doctor or has any critique of the Doctor after Intergalactic Song Contest or whatever that episode was called, Interstellar Song Contest, I think it was. She doesn't no criticism of the Doctor really after he literally tortures a man needlessly. And then she just venerates him, and then she gets shoved into just being a mom in a box. And what I would have preferred is if, maybe they shove Poppy in the, if we're going to go with the story, which I don't love to begin with, but if we're going to do that, shove Poppy in the box, I guess, and, have her be in action saving everyone. I get she's that, but, we don't even get any scenes of her comforting Poppy. Poppy's just a non-character. I know she's a kid, but she had some personality last week where she was literally saying no to everything, kind of going against the reality of the wish, kids questioning things. I love that idea. It's still more of a symbol, but she had something going on as a kid. And I know you don't want to rely too much on child actors, but she's just literally a symbol of a child we need to protect. And we don't even get Belinda comforting her or whatever. She's just shoved in a box, kind of forgotten for most of the episode, until she comes back at the end and just gets shoved into being a mom, and she's not taking part in anything. She's not helping anybody. She's not even using her nursing skills at any point. She's just, again, a symbol. And what a waste of a character. What a waste of an interesting character that Belinda started off being. But the latter half of the season has really just removed any of that, which was so sad considering how strong of a setup she had. So yeah, all of that. I heavily dislike. Just to briefly talk about it too with Unit, I did kind of enjoy the fact that they had this pirate wheel that they spin to like move the whole building. It's a ridiculous camp nonsense stuff. I don't know what it is, but pirate wheels where they shouldn't be in things always kind of weirdly get me. Like, it's here. There was an episode, one of my favorite episodes actually of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, features Captain Pike getting a pirate wheel for no goddamn reason, and I loved it. That's camp nonsense that I like. Though it is weird to me that apparently Unit has these giant cannons. I mean, we knew that from the giggle, but like this giant cannon that they can fire at any point. Like, it does bother me a little bit that we're not really questioning stuff like that, like Conrad does a few episodes ago, and I'm gonna agree with my friend Vera who pointed this out. Like, there's been some people who have pointed out that how that episode doesn't really question Unit, which I agree. It doesn't question Unit, and it puts the critique of Unit as an institution into the mouth of someone like Conrad, who we're supposed to dislike. But I think the episode is being kind of clear that, like, Conrad's not necessarily wrong in his critique. It's the way he goes about it, and that he's using it for his own ends, and he's being a little fascist boy about it, which is kind of how fascists work, right? They do point out rightful problems with institutions a lot of the time, but then use it to like build off of ingrained norms and saying like, oh, well, look, these institutions have gone too woke or whatever, and sort of weaponize the discomfort people feel with institutions for more conservative ends and like far right ends, rather than sort of pushing for something new and sort of like pulling into a pull towards like ingrained norms, like reproductive futurism and all that jazz, as we were seeing with Conrad last week. But I wish the show had been able to be more vocal about Unit and saying like, this is a problem, because the Doctor has been critical of Unit in the past, even in Russell T Davies' era. I believe, if I recall, the 10th Doctor worked with Unit way back when, but was very critical of it and being like, not so sure I really like your militarization going on here, Unit. But now it's just sort of taken as a norm. Like the liberalism of, when I say liberalism, I mean capital L liberalism, as opposed to like, you know, just more liberal, progressive leaning politics, which I don't necessarily disagree with. But like the capital L institutional liberalism of Doctor Who in this era is really showing, especially this season. So I wish we had gotten more question of that. The fact that they have a giant cannon, whatever. I'm overly focused on that. But since it was brought up a few episodes ago, I kind of wanted to reiterate it here because it sort of uses like, yeah, they have a giant cannon in the middle of London. We're not going to question that. No worries. Don't think about it. Do like the Bone Beast though. And I like the idea that they're just grazing. They're just here grazing, just trying to get some nice little atoms to eat when the reality changes. Like who doesn't mind a little grazing Bone Beast? I thought they were adorable and cute, and I'm sad we had to shoot them because the Ronnie used them. So yeah, that was kind of cute. And again, everything else, I mean, there's a lot of noise, right? Like I can talk about all these small things. Like I like Mel coming back. I enjoyed her sort of getting a moment with like fighting the Ronnies. Like I never thought about you. Like all of that stuff. Like there's tiny little things, like little references to Bi-Generation apparently being like, oh, I guess I should focus on this. Bi-Generation apparently being this, like, oh, life finds a way sort of thing. And I don't know if it's in canon. Maybe it is. I haven't watched much of Classic Who, that the Time Lords are sterile. It may or may not be. I don't necessarily mind that, but again, it kind of ties into that reproductive futurism critique that we got going on, where like, oh, biology finds a way to make more children or whatever. By the way, if anyone's not seen it, everyone should go watch the movie Biosphere. If you have not watched Biosphere, I'm not going to spoil that movie for you, but that movie has an interesting idea on that life finds a way sort of stuff. I find that movie... I don't know how I feel about that movie, but I'm fascinated by it, and I want to discuss it at some point, and just haven't found a good avenue. Sorry, that's an aside, but you should all go watch Biosphere if you have not. It's a fascinating movie that I don't know how to feel about, but I really enjoyed it, if that makes any sense. Regardless, that's an aside. But, yeah, the idea of the Time Lords being... sterile and them not being able to like it kind of goes into that idea of them like regenerating to find them, like to all the stuff with the Timeless Child sort of stuff. I'm surprised the Timeless Child didn't come up, but I don't know, I'm unsure how I feel about that. Anyways, we wrap up the episode really quickly, and then we get another Russell T Davies classic, which is an overlong finale for a Doctor. And what's interesting to me is this overlong finale for Ncuti feels even more weirdly egregious given how short his era has been. Like, if we look back at David Tennant's era, which is like the other example of Russell T Davies having these long finales, I didn't necessarily mind the longer ending for David Tennant. I still cry at the end. The only real huge thing I hate about that ending for David Tennant is the Martha ending. Oh boy, that ending's rough for that little finale with David Tennant's initial run. But I don't necessarily mind the overlong finale because it was sort of like, again, a goodbye. But here we don't necessarily know it's a goodbye until we get too far into it. And also, like, Ncuti's only been around for 2 seasons, shortened seasons at that. And so this sort of, like, big goodbye for him doesn't really land for me as strong. And I dislike, again, this idea that, like, Belinda gets to be like the symbol of the family he never had. Also weird to me that we're talking about how the doctor, he goes into the home at the end and he sort of talks to Poppy and is like, I can't have children. Weird to me that he says that and there's no reference to Susan, especially Susan having come up in the last 2 episodes, briefly appearing on the TV last episode and then being literally part of Interstellar Song Contest. So weird to me that we get this whole thing, I can't have children, and Susan is never mentioned, given that she is explicitly said to be his grandchild. Now, I don't, from what I know, not remember, because I've not really seen her episodes, it's never stated if she's explicitly actually his grandchild or just alluded to be like adoptive grandchild or whatever. Never explicitly stated either way, but it's just weird that that's never brought up, especially considering she's been relatively recently brought up. So that's just strange to me. Like, even if the implication was like she was part of the wish world or wish reality, I don't know. It's just weird to me that she's never brought up at all. So disliking that ending of just Belinda being the mom again and the doctor sort of having this big goodbye with her, it just sort of showcases how hollow her character has really been and how short this time with Ncuti's doctor has been, given we get this, like, the ending that this whole episode hinges upon for his doctor is a goodbye to this family unit that, again, never seems to express wanting or desiring. He technically got to have a sort of queer found family back as the 14th Doctor in the bi-generated form, so we never get a reference really to that as him having had that, because the implication is he has those memories from the 14th Doctor's sort of therapy time, so we don't get that sense of him like having had a version of a queer found family beforehand. But we sort of get this ending of like, oh, he always apparently wanted this domestic suburban life that Belinda has, and how sad it is that he never gets to have that, which, again, going back to that reproductive futurism idea. Oh, the other element of this too, I did like Rose saying when she goes to confront Conrad, can I punch him? Love that. But this idea too that fascists only do what they do because of some form of abuse. It's like, oh, he just wanted a father's love. Like, don't get me wrong. It's not necessarily wrong to show what we saw in the Conrad episode, which was to say that his mother was kind of abusive to him, but this is something my friend Vera brought up in one of her videos, that the point that they were making with Conrad in that episode is that he thought he was raised right, that his mom not really showing him any love or affection and being kind of abusive doesn't clock to him as abusive. He thought he was raised well, and that's part of it. So, like, I don't necessarily mind that as an element of that, because there is truth to that. There's not all conservatives, but a lot of conservatives are very, they don't see their children as people. They don't raise their children as people. They just see them as, again, that reproductive futurism, just something that is just extending their legacy, things that they need to create more of and try to mold in their image to sort of continue on their legacy endlessly into the future, instead of letting them be their own people and choosing to be their own people. So there is an element of truth to that. But then the sort of idea that she gets to is like, oh, you just wanted a dad's love and you didn't really have a dad there. And then he gets kind of a happy ending in the alternate reality sort of thing that we get at the end here of like the universe being off by 1 degree. At least I at least appreciate the Rose sort of says like, oh, Conrad gets the happy ending, but Poppy doesn't. But it reads uncomfortable to me to sort of place this whole thing of like, oh, this fascist guy creates fascism because he just wants daddy's love, as opposed to like taking it on its face of like, fascists can be just fascists, because of their desire to sort of like control the world and control how people exist and wanting to control how people function, that this episode doesn't question, in fact reiterates like this is the way the world kind of should be and what we should all be dreaming of with the Doctor story, even though he's a gay man. It's and again, not to say, I want to be clear here because I'm sure it'll be in the comments, this isn't to say that gay people can't or shouldn't want a 2.5 kids, suburban life, home, like that's a perfectly fine thing to desire and to want, but it is not the thing that all queer people want or even all straight people want. But our culture continually produces it as like the ultimate thing that we should all kind of desire and hope for and wish for, even, and everything else from that is like okay, but a deviation from the norm, as opposed to just different ways that people can desire to exist. It's sort of this unquestioned replication of that. And for to place it as like Conrad didn't have that, so he doesn't get to be happy, and that's sort of like what that's sort of the problem. I ultimately am kind of, it's not the worst thing in the world, you know what I mean? It's not terrible, but it's uncomfortable to me to sort of place that as the finale for his character and his point. Oh man, there's so much here. Trying to go through. I do like the idea though that not Rose, we'll get to Rose. That Ruby, I may have been saying Rose earlier. Sorry if I said Rose earlier. I meant Ruby. Ruby, like being able to see the difference in society because of 73 yards. I love that we don't get the explanation of that. I also love that it's implied that the Doctor knows that Poppy disappears. Like he winks at her and he has a sadness in his voice. So it's implied that he knows, but doesn't want to fight for it because it's too painful. I liked that idea. Thought that was interesting. And I like the idea of, him wanting, like, he fights for every single life. Like, I don't love that Poppy is his kid necessarily, but I do like the idea that he fights for every life. That's a good Doctor thing. Absolutely, absolutely love that. Just liked how, when Kate says, in a way, we're all your children, line, that the music like swells really loudly. I'm like, whoa, that's beaten, like just way hitting the nail on the head way too hard with that music, and a little bit too much like we're all your children. Okay. That's really all I can say there. Okay, let us get, last thing that I will say before I get into the rest of this stuff. I did really like the line that the Doctor says to Belinda, beautiful things can be forgotten, but they still happened somewhere. I thought that that's a beautiful line. And, for everything, if that's sort of the last line last profound line that this Doctor gets, I really like that as an idea. Doesn't really fit too much thematically with the entirety of Ncuti's run as like a conclusion to his run that like other Doctors get. Like I think of, David Tennant's I Don't Want to Go, or Matt Smith, sort of like you were always different people, or don't ever be cruel, the sort of like 12th Doctor speech of all the things that he learned. Like those were like good thematic speeches that end these Doctors' arcs that feel like a good culmination of those arcs. Beautiful things can be forgotten, but they still happen somewhere. It doesn't really thematically end his line, but I do his time. But I like it as a concept because it is true. Beautiful things can be forgotten. Cultures get erased, things get destroyed, especially through things like colonization, imperialism, like the erasing of history. But they still happen, and they still mattered, and that's important to remember. That just because not everything is remembered, we should try to remember as much as we can, hold on to our history, not be confined by our history, try to move beyond and do something new, but remember and hold that history. But they still happen somewhere, even if they do get forgotten. I love that as an idea. Also, it does seem to me, he does say, the gods play tricks, but I beat them, I always win. To Belinda seems to be Russell kind of ending his Pantheon era, which is sad because it feels like there was a lot more you could have done with the Pantheon. I mean, he hasn't used it great. To be fair, there's been a couple things that I've liked that we've gotten here and there, like Maestro and Lux. I did enjoy them as part of the Pantheon, even the Giggle to a degree. It feels like there's much more you could do with it, but on the whole, I feel like he's kind of blad with the Pantheon idea, but that seems to be his sort of like, and we're done with the Pantheon now. Which, again, I have two mixed, because, again, haven't loved all of it, but it feels like there's still a little bit there that you could play with, and it kind of feels like it happened there. Not necessarily that you couldn't, but yeah, just worth at least mentioning that. All right, let us get to the three big things here, though. First off, let me start with Jodie. I should mention, I never even talked about Shooty having to, regenerate to set the timeline right. Bit of a forced reason to regenerate. It's a really forced reason for him to have to regenerate. There's no, he just sort of chooses to do it. And it happens. I don't know. It just feels a little forced as a choice to make him regenerate. But regardless, Jodie coming back, I actually kind of really like. I appreciate a couple things that it does. One, just in a meta way, I do like that it celebrates Jodie a little bit. Girl got such a short shrift in her era. I really loved her. I actually really liked her performance of the Doctor, and even some of the characterization of the Doctor, of her being someone more reserved and pulled back. That was sort of an interesting way to play the Doctor. And gets called out here with Shooty saying, "You don't say I love you." And he gets to be the Doctor who gets to be more emotive, gets to be more expressive because of the stuff with the 14th Doctor stuff. But he gets to be that more openly loving Doctor, which is somewhat undone by Interstellar Song Contest, but that's a different thing. But he gets to be that more loving Doctor and being more willing to express his emotions more openly and saying I love you to people in a way that Jodie didn't. And I like we get that sort of juxtaposition between the two of them. And I think that's an interesting sort of look at Jodie's characterization and Shooty's characterization and sort of the evolution of the Doctor. So I like that as an arc for them. And I like the fact that Jodie gets a little bit of a moment to shine here as celebrated, as she gets to be the one to sort of help the, Shooty move on. So I think she deserves that because, man, her era was not great. I love her characterization. I love her Doctor, but her stories and her era was easily the worst in the modern era by a hot mile, which is sad. But regardless, I do really like her ending. Some people will probably argue it overshadows Shooty a little bit. And I could see that. I mean, both of his regeneration into the Doctor and his regeneration out of the Doctor feature cameos or appearances by other Doctors. 14th Doctor stuck around for his regeneration. Now we have the 13th Doctor, right? 13th? I might be mixing up numbers. Anyways, Jodie's Doctor popping in for his finale. So it's sort of we have to have Shooty sort of be surrounded by other Doctors instead of having his own moment. Which is a little sad, I do agree, but I do appreciate what this does for showcasing the evolution of his arc in a way that, you couldn't really do elsewise, and also sort of giving her a moment. Okay, but now to talk about the regeneration itself, because Shooty regenerates into Billy fucking Piper. For such a small moment, I have so many thoughts. First and foremost, I'm trying to figure out my thoughts here. It's weird how they did this because it is a shock. It's supposed to be oh, look, he's regenerating. Oh, look who he regenerated into. So it's kind of done for shock value that it's Billy Piper. Number one, that he's regenerating. Number two, that it's Billy Piper. So a bit of a shock value thing there that is very similar to David Tennant regenerating from Jodie. Of look, it's a person that that they regenerated into. Isn't that surprising and shocking? And I find that sort of shock value spectacle to be very disappointing. It is not allowing us to sort of live in this celebratory moment. It sort of gives us this instant shock value. And on top of that, it is relying again on nostalgia because we have Billy Piper and it's sort of ooh, it's shocking because we know her from before, from the previous time. And it's just this nostalgic shock value, which to a degree I was okay with to some level with David Tennant coming back. because, like, especially as we got in the news, like, he was only coming back for a short time. And it was, like, for these specials, it was, like, a thing like, oh, we're going to celebrate his era for Rusty Davis and it'll get people interested. Like, it made sense both as a business model and, like, you know, I'm not above a little bit of nostalgia, fun stuff, especially since the specials ended up being generally on the whole really good, and use that nostalgia to try and say something new with the 10th Doctor / 14th Doctor's story. So I didn't mind that necessarily, but it's again reiterating and doing the same thing, just with Billie Piper instead of David Tennant. And again, calling back to that same era. It's not even like a different era. It's still going back to Russell T Davies' first era again. So it's the same era of nostalgia that we're pulling from here. So dislike all of that. It's like we're pulling from nostalgia. It's just shock value. I have nothing against Billie Piper. I really like Billie Piper. Girl deserves, like, she's gone on to have such a big career since Doctor Who. And it's just weird to me to have her come back. And then also on top of that, we don't really know, not only do we not know how long she'll stick around, is she like the next proper Doctor for a time? Like, she's going to be like several series and whatever. We don't know. And I think it's because the show doesn't know, because right now the Doctor Who's future is up in the air. So it's really weird to like lock her down as a Doctor when we don't know where Doctor Who's going next. Like, are we going to get another season? Who the hell knows? How long will it be until it comes back? Who the hell knows? Will it be 1 year, 2 years? Will it be 10 years? Is it going on hiatus? Who the hell knows? And it really does feel like this show trying to get that bump of like interest at the end here, being like, well, you better bring us back because you want to know what's happened with Billie Piper, Doc, don't you? Yeah? It feels a little desperate, I guess is what I'm getting at, to sort of like try to create this sort of shock value interest to get people to want to come back and buy in on more seasons instead of generating its own interest on its own terms, rather just stealing from past eras to sort of get that sort of desire for people to want to come back in a way that is repeating what they already did with David Tennant's Doctor. It reeks of desperation in a way that David Tennant coming back had a little bit of like, oh, we lost some interest after Jodie's era. Let's bring this back to get some people back on board who maybe haven't seen Doctor Who in a while because they jumped up after Jodie or, you know, even earlier eras based on nostalgia. It feels like it's doing the same thing and it reeks as more desperation here. And again, nothing against Billie Piper. I like her. I like her a lot. But I just dislike her doing this quite a bit. And yeah, and so again, it's a question of like, when will we see her again? Who knows? Who knows? I doubt BBC even knows because they're waiting on Disney Plus to make a decision. I don't think anyone really knows. So it just reeks as like a desperate play instead of like a plan of like of an interesting idea. And maybe Russell has some ideas. I'm sure he does of what he wants to do with this surprise this sort of Billie Piper is back. But on the surface, it really does just feel like let's just do a desperate play to try and regenerate interest. No pun intended, I guess. So yeah, I think that's kind of my feelings on it. It's like, again, nothing against Billie Piper, but don't love it. Don't love what it sort of signals. And I'll be frank, just to sort of wrap up my thoughts on this season as a whole. This season was kind of a downer for me. I am I know a lot of people were very upset at series 1 of this Russell T Davies era. I am a defender of it. I think the opening and closing, which is what a lot of people focused on, the sort of like Sutek reveal and all of that stuff in the finale and the Space Babies episode, like people think about those bookends of like, wow, those are really weak. And I agree, they are really weak, but there was strength in those, in that series 1 as well. Really love Dot and Bubble. Really I adore 73 Yards. Like, I think there's really a lot of, Rogue is really good too, like both the character, who doesn't really get reiterated again this episode either, by the way, which is, I guess he appears briefly at the beginning in the sort of flashback for the Nita, but, and again, by the way, also Nita's preggers too, which is again more women just being pregnant because they didn't get to be with the Doctor. Nonsense. I didn't mention that earlier, but frustrating there. We already talked about that enough. But again, Rogue I really like. So anyways, I like series 1 a decent amount. I think there was a lot of really good there, even though, you know, I still think there's a lot of frustrations that come from Russell T Davies' style that I think people are seeing the cracks of more of nowadays. Especially in the shortened seasons where everything is much more condensed. But series 2, man, this one, I really kind of struggle seeing anything that I really loved. I liked Lux decently enough, but everything else, like The Well was again another nostalgia thing that stole from episodes like Midnight to try and get some interest in it. Interstellar Song Contest is, the more I think about it, morally morally bad, just a morally bad episode in so many different ways, the more and more I think about it, from its allegory to what it does to the Doctor's character. And then this finale, like, I like the first episode for the Conrad stuff, but really the rest of it is, like, I think the only episode this season that really excited me is I liked the Christmas special decently enough, and I liked Conrad's episode decently enough, despite my unit criticism that I talked about earlier. But, like, neither of those episodes, and maybe I'm missing episodes, but, like, neither of those episodes, like, I was like, oh my god, amazing. This season just was kind of meh, and in many cases was like, ooh, what are we doing here? None of it was out and out terrible, but some of it was in terms of choices made, and just kind of never really excited me. And this ending doesn't excite me, and it's sad. I hate to be that person, but especially because I don't want to be that person, like, I want to be that person like, I'm really excited, I'm really pumped, I want to try and put positivity out there. I really do want to be that person who puts the positivity out there about things that I love, especially in the face of, like, the bullshit. Like, there's so much bullshit in the world right now, so much bullshit just within these fandoms right now. Like, there's a lot of bullshit being flung at this series of Doctor Who for disingenuous or shitty or dumb culture war nonsense bullshit reasons, and that happens with so many shows. But just being honest, even trying to remove myself from that, even trying to be that positive voice, I just have to say, and that's really sad. I don't want to be that person to say, but it just hasn't really excited me. And we'll see. I think the only thing we got really look forward to with Doctor Who in the near-ish future is... Oh, no, I lied. I want to at least call this out. The storytelling episode of the season was actually fantastic. Sorry, we did at least want to say that. That one episode this season, did really love. It's one episode of a rest of the season of meh. That episode was great. Do adore that. At least want to make sure that's clear. Forgot about that episode. That one is fan-fucking-tastic. But I... ultimately am just sort of like, the only thing we have to look forward to, I guess, is that war between the land and the sea thing with Unit, and given how everything's gone with Unit and with the romance and stuff, like, not really super excited about that show. I don't even really know. It's like about the Sea Devils, I think. So it's like, okay. Like, maybe it'll be good. Maybe it'll be great. Maybe it'll end up being one of the best things that Doctor Who's ever done. I don't know. And I'll watch it and we'll review it together. So maybe it'll be fantastic, but it doesn't really excite me on the surface of what it is. And then who the hell knows what's happening with Doctor Who after, other than, like, I guess Billie Piper will be around. Well, for how long, ? Who knows when she'll come back, da-da-da-da-da. So I don't know. We'll see. Anyways, what did you think about this finale? I'd love to hear all your thoughts down below. But beyond all of that, my friends, I hope you live long and prosper.